Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. I'm honored to have in studio with us my producer, Jeff Reed, and Ann Reed, who is a contributor to the AFA Journal and has been a guest on this program before. Jeff and Ann, welcome to Focal Point.
Hey. Thank you, Brian.
Great to have you here. Good to have Jeff out from behind the board and out from the cavern in which you work to make this program possible. So
it looks a lot different from here.
Yeah. Well, with Ann on the set, it looks a lot better from here.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you guys, both of you were at the March for Life, and Jeff, I want to start with you. Both of you were there together. But Jeff, you shared some of your, just what your observation, thing that struck you. First of all, about the size of the march.
Yeah, I believe the media reported that it would be, the permit was for 50,000. Now, it was impossible for me to give a good estimate on that because you cannot see the beginning of the march from the end of the march. And it was packed not only street-wide, but on the sidewalks as well.
And you guys observed, you saw a pro-gun control rally like the next day. And tell me what you observed about the attendance there and then what the media did with that.
Right. Well, that was the next day. We were leaving and we went by the Washington Monument, and there was a group. I think we kind of estimated between 400 and 600. So let's just say 500 people. And it got our attention because there was a big stage set up there and hardly anybody there. So we had to look at the signs and noticed it was a rally for gun control. And the lack of media at the March for Life was evident. I mean, Fox News, and there was some Christian media outlets covering that, but I mean, the mainstream media was absent. But at this gun rally, they were all there.
Yeah, well, and I monitor news over the course of the entire weekend doing show prep for Monday, and I just see the number of stories that came across my desk, across my laptop, about the gun control rally. One story after another from the mainstream media, but hardly anything about the March for Life other than from alternative media sites that do cover those stories. I'm looking at this story here from Newsbusters about what the New York Times did. For the last 5 years, they didn't even run a single story on the March for Life. New York Times, not even a single story the last 5 years. 2011, they did have a couple of photographs on page 12. So here's an event with 650,000 people, and this year they covered it, 815-word story buried on the bottom of page 9, and the story at the top of page 9 was written by a religion reporter who was using some liberal Catholic activists to bash pro-life supporters because they also weren't anti-gun. So the top story is all about how these pro-lifers are, according to liberal Catholics, are being hypocritical because they're not, for gun control.
Right.
And then the story about the march is at the bottom. And Jeff and Ann, maybe you can speak to this. You're observing the way the visuals of the media covering the pro-life.
Right. I mean, the pictures that you saw from the gun rally were strategically done to make the crowd look big and towards the stage. Now, at the March for Life, there was only, what would you say, about 20 pro-abortion activists there, and they were right at the steps of the Supreme Court. We're talking 650,000 plus of March for Life supporters. A group of 20, they took a picture and put on the Washington Post a picture where it looks like it's half and half. So it gives this impression that this is a big discussion going on here. It was not the case.
Well, I remember being back in Washington, D.C. for the Promise Keepers event, Stand in the Gap, back in 1997. Again, that was 1 million men filling the Washington Mall, and there was a small protest of these feminists from now. I mean, maybe a dozen, maybe 20 at the outside. They got as much coverage from the national media as the 1 million guys that were there to repent for the nation's sins.
And I have to say, I think I knew what AFR did was important before, but now seeing the actual liberal bias there, it was unspeakable. To see that firsthand just gives you more the idea of how important AFR and similar outlets are.
Well, and I'm going to play this soundbite later in the program, but Ted Cruz, a new senator from Texas, he said, my advice to you, if you're a House Republican, a conservative Republican, cancel your subscription to the New York Times. Don't even read it. Don't even bother, because you know what their message is going to be. It's going to be slanted. It's going to be biased. Liberals are good. Conservatives are evil. So don't even bother to read it. And so I think what I'm hearing from you, Jeff, is this is a word I think to our listening audience. Look, you need a place where you can turn to where the information is reliable. You can count on it. It's been vetted. It's trustworthy information, and where you're going to hear the news that's important on some of these issues. If your source of information is something like the New York Times, bottom of page 9, your source of information is the Washington Post, you think it was an even Steven rally. So there's a crying need for alternative media like Focal Point AFR Talk.
I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad.
Well, Ann, let me talk with you. What did you observe? What did you witness? What are some of the things that kind of struck you as you look back on the 2 days that you spent there? What stands out in your mind?
The number of youth that were there. I mean, I knew that ahead of time just from, hearing that from other people, but actually being there and it was almost overwhelming just seeing, busload upon busload upon busload of, high school students and college students, primarily I think high school students that were there. And it was just really just overwhelming in the space where the youth rally was held. There was not room enough to fit them all. So that would tell me that it had increased from last year. Obviously, that they didn't get a big enough space from last year to this year. We had a Planned Parenthood prayer vigil the morning before the march, and probably the bulk of those who were coming to the march weren't there yet. And just at that prayer vigil, I believe there were probably more at that prayer vigil than there were at that gun control rally. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just the sheer numbers, what was shocking. And one thing that I would like to say that actually surprised me is that the Washington Post actually did carry a story, and it was quite respectful. You interviewed Georgette Forney on the day of the march, and they interviewed her and, talked about kind of how the Silent No More campaign got started, and apparently the reporter was there during the reception for the Silent No More campaign, Women and Men, and it was actually a respectful story. I was surprised.
I'm looking at a piece here from the American Spectator, last paragraph, and the point of the article is the pro-life march's new young face. That's the emphasis of the piece. And he refers here to Jean Monahan, who's the president of the March for Life Education and Defense Fund, and she estimated that 80% of the marchers Friday were under the age of 20. That goes to what your observation about high school and college students. Benedictine College of Atchison, Kansas, this is Atchison, Kansas. This is halfway across the country. They sent 7 buses filled with 400 people from Atchison, Kansas. It's a 30-hour bus ride to Washington, and a spokesman said this was easily the largest delegation the college had sent in the 28 years it has participated in the March for Life. And Ann, let me ask you to weigh in on this, and then Jeff, I want you to comment on too. What is the significance of the fact that there are so many young people turning out to support the sanctity of life?
Well, I think the tide has really turned. There is no more denying that the child in the womb is exactly that, a child in the womb, with the ultrasounds, the technology that we have out there, and not only that, just the voices. Sometimes I think, especially with the recent election, many people that are in leadership or just involved with the pro-life movement at all have become discouraged. So I am hugely encouraged after being at that event, and I'm just ready to hit the ground running, and I know that so many other men and women are too, and that's a big part of it, is seeing the young people who are on board, and we look at that and we recognize that, what we have been working toward for all of these years, and I can't claim many of those years, but many can, and that it has not gone unrecognized by our young people.
Well, I know there were pro-life events all over the country. Debbie and I, my wife and I, participated in a little prayer vigil right here in our hometown on Friday night, next door to a crisis pregnancy center that has a garden out in the back that's designed to help women recover from the trauma of an abortion. And it was a candlelight vigil. It was at night. It was raining. It was cold. And yet there was a sizable turnout to Stand for Life. I got a story here, 50,000 people marching for life in San Francisco. Wow. Same place, Jeff. Same place where you and I went to that pro-gay rally. Same area in front of City Hall there, where we saw the guys running around in the absolute total nude, had 50,000 people there standing for the sanctity of life. So, Jeff, your reaction coming away from what you saw and kind of as you're looking ahead, this continued campaign for the sanctity of life, what are you taking away from the weekend?
Yeah, I would say that it was an eye-opener in the sense that it really is a fight for the long haul. We tend to want to get quick results, and then you see the youth out there and you realize that truth does come to the surface, and they have an ability, a determination to go right at the problem, where we tend to try and be a little more careful. Very encouraging. I think that after years of indoctrination and bombardment by the media, I think the truth of sonograms and YouTube and different pictures and stuff have really hit the youth in a way that has changed their lives and made them more determined for life.
I remember back in the 80s when I was working pro-life activism in my home state, I talked to a gynecologist, actually the man that delivered our babies, and was just asking him for his perspective on how we can fight the sanctity of life issue. And he said, well, he thought the most effective way was with pictures of babies in the womb. Mm-hmm. And this was really before you had the development of sophisticated ultrasound technology. Didn't have 3D, didn't have 4D ultrasound at that point. And I know we got a informed consent bill passed in the Idaho legislature about a decade later based on the ultrasound technology. And the evidence is that maybe 85%, 65 to 85% of abortion-minded women that come into a pregnancy clinic, they see the ultrasound, they see the picture of their baby, they just can't bring themselves to kill it. Well, Jeff and Ann Reed have been our guests here on Focal Point, bringing us their recollections of what happened in Washington, D.C. at the March for Life. And one last thing, I've got an interesting story here, Jeff and Ann. You won't have time to respond to this, but I hadn't even thought about this. Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade, she never had an abortion, not in her whole life.
That's right.
And she gave birth to a baby and put it up for adoption. That girl would be 43 years old today. We don't know who she is. We don't know where she is. But there could be a baby out there that Jane Roe gave life to that may be happily married, may have children now who are verging on adulthood. So that's encouraging for us to remember as we wage the fight for the sanctity of human life.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you for letting us go.
You bet.
I don't know if you were trying to, the Iranians sent a monkey to space and